What if I told you that there is a way to drastically increase the odds of you knowing that your painting is going to be a success before you even start painting? Well, there is. It's called doing studies. Now, you have to know how to go about doing studies. Studying without knowing how to study isn't gonna do you any good. My grades in high school are proof of that. I actually had a D in art class my senior year of high school. But that's a story for another video, or maybe a podcast. Been thinking about starting a podcast. Could also do the story about how I got fired from teaching wine and paint nights. Should I start a podcast? Leave a comment below. So in this video, I'm going to go over specifically my current process for painting landscapes and talk about why I use markers to do sketches and what I'm thinking about when I'm planning the painting. I'm gonna talk about how this happened and then how I came to the final painting. All right, let's start by taking a look at the reference photo. So this photo was taken on my trip to Jackson Hole. Now there's a lot of things that I like about this photo reference. Is one, I like the path here. It's always great to have a path in a landscape. It's just such a strong directional tool to bring you into the painting. Really like all these rocks over here, just really cool structures, and also it's a really good strong angle, you know, compositionally, like where you decide to put that is going to help direct the eye a lot. I like how, you know, I can see these flowers that are just a foot in front of me, but also I can see these trees way out on the edge of the lake right there. And so the first thing I like to do is just see what I'm working with and figure out the major lines of the scene. So here are the major lines, and it's pretty obvious where all these are pointing, which is right here. And that would be a good place to put your focal point. Now, your focal point is going to be the area with highest contrast. You know, where your darkest dark meets your lightest light. And a lot of times you should try and make the focal point the only place where that happens. But now, see, since I was there and actually took this photo, I remember the feeling when I was there, what was drawing my attention the most was this little area jutting out into the water. I don't know why, but just that caught my eye, and it was just so cool to be able to see that far and just to see those trees right there at the edge of the lake. So I want to see if I can have a composition that can get the viewer's eye through the painting all the way back to that area. So the next thing I do is very small black and white value studies. My goal is to get a good composition that works with just 3 values: a dark, a midtone, and a light. And I actually do this with a set of gray markers. If you want to get these gray markers, I'll put a link in the description below to the kind that I like to use. So I did a lot of thumbnails for this, and the main photos I was using were these two down here. The main thing I liked in this photo was I just really liked this fence. I thought it was really interesting, and this tree right here, but mainly just these poles and this fence. I was like, oh, maybe I can work that in somehow. So ignore that one. That one's just from another painting. But looking at this one here, you can see I got the dark trees kind of angling that way. You know, the shadow from the rock, you know, another cast shadow. I have the path being one of the lightest values, another dark there. And this one was actually at the beginning stages before I decided to make the focal point that little piece of land in the distance. So like this right here was the focal point. But again, I didn't want to do, you know, a focal point right there. And there was just some problems I was having with this one of having too many areas where the lightest light and darkest dark met. You know, I had darkest value and the lightest value meet there. You know, I had it meet right there, right there, right there, and right there. And so I was like, I need to make it so there's only one place, my focal point, where that happens. And I tried a similar thing in this one, you know, tried again in this one and just wasn't really working. Same thing here, just, you know, trial and error. I tried to incorporate, you know, this fence post and this tree here, just wasn't feeling it. But this one here, I started to get onto something. You can see I have that darkest dark and lightest light in the back there. And that's the only place in the whole scene where that's happening. I don't know exactly what I was thinking, like what that is. I don't know if I was like planning on putting a little boat or something back there. I'm on the right track because I still have a light right there. I still have dark shapes, but this is the only place where that dark and light is touching. But then I kind of took a detour again and was trying to make, you know, this whole old fence work, but I was running the same problems with making this path light and just where the shadows crossed. And, you know, I tried to put like a little person in there and just wasn't working out. But then I kind of finally figured out what I liked, which was this one right here. So I would have the path be a light value. I'd have this big rock over here be grouped into the light value. Have these trees coming over, dark value. This big piece of land, dark. And then the light would be the ground. A lot of times we're on the shoreline where there's no trees. It can catch a lot of sunlight and be pretty bright. I know if I push that a little bit, I can make it my focal point. Also, variety of shapes is really important. Out of all my dark shapes, none of them are the same size or length. You know, that was very conscious to do, because if they're all similar in size and shape, it just wouldn't be dynamic or interesting. Now, composition is just one of the most important things when it comes to landscape. So if you really want to get better at landscapes, I highly recommend picking up Edgar Payne's book, Composition of Outdoor Painting. Probably one of the best books I've come across in terms of understanding composition and just like figuring out where to start. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the description below. All right, so now that I've figured out the composition in terms of the big value shapes, it's time to do small little color studies. And now I'm doing it in this book of brown craft paper that I got from Scott Christensen. I'll put a link in the description to where you can get this. This has been a game changer for me. I love it. You know, I've always done little studies, but in the past I've just taped off canvas panels and just done it on that. But I've been liking the sketchbook so much more because one, it's just in sketchbook form, so they're all just right there. And also it's brown paper, so it's already toned to neutral value, so you're just ready to go. I use oils on this. This isn't gouache or acrylic. And the paper's really absorbent, so they actually dry really quick, and it's very easy to layer up paint on it. It's just so helpful to be able to do these small, quick studies and figure out if things are gonna work in, you know, a 20 or 30 minute painting. I definitely wanna be solving my problems in this little sketchbook before I get to, you know, a 16 by 20 or 20 by 30 inch painting. All right, quick side note. If you struggle with color mixing, I'm not getting into color mixing in this video because I offer the color mixing lesson from my Foundations of Oil Painting course for free. If you wanna check that out, there's a link to it in the description of this video. Now I did 4 of these just to have as examples to show you. And you know, this is the one that I'm definitely gonna end up using. You see I got, you know, dark shape there, big dark shape of the trees, this dark shape. And I think at this point, I thought I was gonna be putting a little boat, but there was a boat there, like a ferry that brought people across the lake to go to this hiking trail. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll put that in there, and you know, that will be the contrast of light and dark. You know, I made sure to keep the grass darker than the main rock right here, you know, adhering to the value composition that I created. But looking at this one where I tried to put the fence in, like it looks cool and everything, but it's too distracting. Like there's just too much going on right here. I have, you know, this bright from the rock intersecting with the dark value of this, so your eye's just gonna be drawn there because of the high contrast. You know, anywhere there's high contrast, your eye's gonna be drawn to, so, you know, your eye's gonna get hit there, you're gonna hit right there, you know, I got a person right there, and then I got that there, and it's just too much going on. Now in this one, I wanted to show what it'd be like if you push the shadows in the rock as dark as they were in the photo. You see I got like a really dark value in the rock right next to the really light value in the rock. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna cause high contrast. But if you put it with all the rocks, it's just, your eye's not gonna know where to go, and it's gonna be harder for you to move through the painting visually. You're gonna get caught up on, you know, the high contrast there and there and there and there, and it's just gonna be too much. Now I wanna do it just a little bit bigger, just to get one more pass at it to make sure I'm solving all the major problems. All right, so here's the full color sketch. Now the main thing I wanna point out is how I don't go by the photo for the values. I adhere to the value composition that I created. So areas like this water and the sky, I purposefully keep darker. I don't let it get as bright as it is in the photo. I also make sure that this major big rock is the only one that I let get really bright. You can see I toned down the light side of these rocks because I don't want to draw attention to it. This is the main light shape I want. So I have that main light shape, this main light shape, and then this main light shape back there. All right, now it's time to paint. And I actually started by painting this on a 20 by 30 inch canvas. It was a leftover canvas from a previously failed painting that I wiped off. So I start painting and I'm working and I'm working, and It's going well. I'm liking what's happening. And I get about 3 or 4 hours in and I realize that there's like these 2 lines going down the middle of the canvas. And it's right where the stretcher bar in the back is. And I don't know how, like it was in a stack of canvases, so I think the pressure on it damaged the canvas. And those 2 lines, like I tried everything. Like I tried scraping it with a palette knife. I tried taking the paint off and then sanding that area, thinking it was just leftover paint or something. But when I got really close and looked, the canvas was actually damaged. Like the weave was broken up and it was causing these 2 lines right down the center. And I was so frustrated. I was like, oh man. And I kept like going back and forth. It's like, oh, like, should I keep going? Will anybody notice? And I was like, no, I will notice. And just to make sure that I didn't give in and just keep painting on it, I completely ruined the canvas by punching a hole through it. Now, this wasn't a punch out of frustration and anger. It was literally just to completely move on from that, knowing that there is no saving it. And it was actually a good idea because I was realizing there were still some problems with the painting, things that I didn't account for. And I kind of forgot like one of my most important rules for landscape painting, which is to always at the beginning identify the star of the painting. Now, if you haven't heard me talk about this, when I say a star of the painting, it's good to think about the painting like a story, a movie or a play or something. And you have to choose one main character. There only can be one main character and only one story being told. And there can be other characters, but they always have to support that main character and that main story. The same thing goes for painting. Probably the most common compositional problem I see students run into with landscape painting is that they see all these great things. Like in this one, they'd see the lake and the trees and the hill and the path and the rocks. And they will try to put it all in and try and give each element equal real estate in the painting, which makes it not a very dynamic painting. Like nothing's standing out. It's like, I don't know. It's like, what is this painting about? Is it about the trees? Is it about the lake? Is it about the hill? And looking at this, it's like very clear that this hill right here is the biggest piece of the landscape. We have the trees that takes up a good amount, but it's not as much as the hill. We got the lake that is even smaller. The path is good size, but it's nowhere near this big. And I honestly didn't have much of a plan for this. Like I wasn't even planning on putting this many rocks, but like I had all this empty space. I was like, well, I gotta put something there. So I was like, all right, I think I need to change the dimensions a little bit and maybe I should put this on a 16 by 20. So I went back to the drawing board, literally did a value sketch with my markers, and then I did another color sketch. So I have the new sketch right here, and you can see I just put a lot more planning and effort into like what was gonna be happening all in here. You can see over here, it's just, I was just like, I don't really know what's going on, and just kind of left it empty. I also made this bigger, take up more space and be more interesting. I made this rock bigger, planned on more detail with the flowers and everything here in the foreground. So I start all over again on the 16 by 20 inch canvas this time. I tone my canvas with a mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, and then I draw it in with that same brown paint, blocking the big major shapes, make sure my value composition is there before I get going. And when I first start, my main goal is to get paint covering the whole canvas. I want to block out all the major shapes with relatively thin paint, mainly the dark values because I work dark to light. And I just want to get paint on the canvas so I can start comparing things. So I can start making decisions. I want to get something in for the major areas so that I can compare it to other areas. And a lot of the process for me is bouncing around, just dialing things in. In my head, I'm constantly identifying what's wrong and then coming up with a solution to it. So it's like, oh, this area is not sitting in the back far enough. All right, how do I solve that? Well, I can make the color less saturated. I could make the color cooler. I could make the edges softer. I could paint it more simply with less detail. I could look at another area and be like, oh, like I want to bring this forward more. I want it to be more interesting. It's like, all right, can you find color complements and push the complement colors more? Is it in the foreground? Should you put more detail to bring it forward more? Are the colors around it too saturated and taking attention away from it? Should you knock down the saturation of the colors around it? Also, I'm always thinking, am I deviating from my big value composition? Have I pushed things out of what I planned and it's kind of ruining the composition? I always got to make sure that I'm still adhering to what I planned. Now, speaking of planning, you want to try and stick to what you plan, but always be open to change if it's going to make the painting better. And I came to the realization that these trees were just too much. You know, coming back to this idea of the star of the painting, this hill and these rocks are the star of the painting. But these trees right now, I feel like are upstaging it a little bit. Now, one way to make the star of the painting clear is making that area bigger and more pronounced. But another way to do that is to lessen other areas. So if I make these trees smaller and take up less space, it's going to make that hill and those rocks that much more important. So that's what I do. I test it out first with my sketch. I just alter my sketch to see if it's gonna work, and it did, and I liked it. And so I went to my painting and it was still wet. I took a palette knife, scraped off those trees and fixed it. And from that point on, there really wasn't any more problems. I was really happy with how the painting turned out. Some key things I wanna point out too that I think are helpful are how I pushed a lot more detail, a lot more brush strokes up front here to bring it up front. And then as you get further back, less and less brush work. You know, the brush work gets longer. You'll see like a lot longer strokes and everything's a lot more simple on the backside of this mountain. It's also a lot cooler. You can see the green right here, and the back edge of the mountain's a lot cooler than say the green that's up front here. And also know that not everything needs a lot of detail. Like I found myself taking out a lot of detail in these trees, and I felt like the more simple they were, the better. You can see back here, I still have this really high contrast with the ground and the shadows in this land and the trees here. I definitely heightened it and pushed it, but I feel like it helps get your eye there. I also made sure to not have the shadows in all of these rocks be that dark. They were very dark in the photo, and there's a very high contrast between the dark side and light side, but I purposefully toned those back. You know, I kept these up here more warm, kind of purplish, and these back here more blue. But value-wise, I purposefully lightened the shadows a lot. You know, I didn't want that high contrast distracting the viewer's eye and going up into here. Now, my goal for how the viewer's eye goes through this is, you know, they come down this path, they go up the trees here, and then they go along this mountain range right here to the focal point, and then these interesting rocks bring them back down to the flowers, and then you can start through again. But now, am I 100% sure that's how the viewer's gonna go through the painting? No, that was my plan and I gave it my best shot. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you can take some good information from it and implement it in your own work. If you'd like to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. I'm Chris Fornatero, here telling you to go get painting.